Welcome back to another episode of Misplaced Garage. Today, I'm gonna be mounting the engine into the car. So I'm actually going to be starting with mounting the transmission because that seems like the easier part to start with, because once I can get this in the general area of where I want it to, which it looks like there's already mounts that might line up with an old part, but we'll see if I can get that to line up correctly, and if I can, then that's awesome. So now my thought process is going to be, I'm going to use some mild 1/8" steel to create a box mount that I can bolt to the bottom of that transmission and bolt to this. I'm going to have to drill 2 holes through that, but that's okay, not a huge deal, as long as I can get the transmission mounted in there. So this thing turned out mildly decent. There's some good welds and there's some bad welds on there. Being the center parts aren't very good, but the exterior of it is pretty stout. Let's see if this thing even fits in there. I have to cut a little bit of this material down. I did grind it down a little bit, so yeah. It's still kind of hot, but that'll basically fit in right about there. And then the transmission will rest on top of it, and it will mount through the bottom after I drill some holes through this thing. So yeah, I was able to get those drilled out. I made one slightly larger just because of some drill walk. Moved the bolt hole a little bit further that way, so I made it slightly larger so that I can just kind of push it one way or the other way, whichever way it needs to go. Let's go see if this mounts onto the transmission. You might be asking, why did I just cut this motor mount in half? But in theory, I should be able to use this rubber as a insulator for the transmission mount. So I should be able to basically cap the top of this, drill some holes through there, and then I can thread bolts through this so that it rides on the rubber rather than on solid steel. This was my initial idea of just a solid mount, but it didn't end up working out exactly how I wanted. So I can still use this. I have to cut the top plate off, but once I cut the top plate off, I can just drill holes through the rubber and then through this bottom steel plate, and that should make it be able to hold the transmission, and it will be a lot shorter than what it already was because the transmission was sitting too high with this solid mount. So here's the general idea of the transmission mount. I'm going to weld this piece of steel to the frame, and then I have a centering hole, so I need to drill a hole there in the center, drill that through, and then once I put that on there, then I can put this on top and then drill holes through here and then kind of sandwich this thing together. And once I do that, this rubber part in the center will be able to absorb most of the vibration. Here's to doing sketchy things with angle grinders. this all grinded down where I'm going to be welding, so that is okay. The only other spot, so when I was cutting the frame, I actually accidentally cut into inside of the frame. I meant to just cut off this little lip, but it went a little too far, so I also have to weld that up. Probably going to put a plate on it or something on the side of it to make it a little bit stronger, but this will sit basically just inside of here. Right about there. I need some longer bolts before I can do this, but that's nearly how it's going to be, and that should be structurally solid enough. I know it doesn't have a ton of room onto the lip into the front, but that's not the end of the world. I think it looks pretty good, in my opinion. Yeah, and then I just throw this on there, and that kind of acts as like a leverage from the bottom of the transmission that kind of distributes the weight across more of an area. Alright, so now it's another day later. I went and bought some bolts for the transmission mount. I really need to make a workbench. That should be coming soon. That'll probably be the next project that I take on, because I am tired of working on random surfaces and like leaning over. But I went out and bought some grade 8 hardware for the transmission. I bought 2 different sizes because I didn't know which one would work the best. I think the longer one is going to work better, but we'll see. This slides up through here, and then that goes on top. Yeah, that looks like an appropriate amount of threads to go through there. I understand it looks a little rough, but it should work just fine. So as it sits on the rubber, it should remove some of the vibration. I don't think it's going to remove a lot of it, but some of it will be nice. Got the engine settled in there exactly where it needs to be, both side to side and forwards to backwards, but the problem I'm running into now is the stud and bolts on the bottom of the transmission mount that I just made come in contact with that small cross member that goes across the frame. So I'm thinking I may have to cut part of that out, or I may have to expand it forward rather than backwards. I will see. I mean, I would rather not cut it out and leave it as original as it is, but it is what it is if I have to cut it out. Anyways guys, if you want to stay tuned and see how I figure out that transmission mounting issue, please like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.